This is Dennis Ramundi. I'm here with my co-host, Phil Goldberg. Our podcast, Spirit Matters, found at spiritmatterstalk.com. I want to begin by thanking everybody out there that's helped us stay on the air by your contributions. We're not a nonprofit, but if you go to our website, spiritmatterstalk.com, you can help contribute so we can keep our archives free and available to the public. We have had many great guests, and we have a great guest today. Kikanza is our guest. She is the author of many articles and 6 books, including Cultural Proficiency and Fish Out of Water. She lives in Los Angeles, where she serves on the bioethics committee of the UCLA Medical Center and the boards of several social service organizations. Kikanza, thank you so very much for taking the time to come on with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Can't wait. Couldn't wait.
Well, in the interest of transparency, I should say that Kikanza and I have been good friends for, 15, 20 years now?
Yeah.
And have been meeting regularly in a spiritual group. And I thought it was about time to have her on the show. Kikanza, we always begin by giving our listeners and now viewers, because we're on a YouTube channel, a sense of the spiritual history or journey that our guests have taken. So could you briefly give us your spiritual background, which I know is rich and fascinating, and how you came to the work you do?
Sure. Probably the most significant thing that happened to me on my spiritual journey was when I was 16 and I got kicked out of Sunday school. I was taking lots of math, science classes in school. And then my mother's rule was that you go to church or Sunday school if you want to have a social life. And so my brother and I chose Sunday school because it was shorter and we could have more of the day to ourselves. And I was trying to make sense. I was trying to align what I was learning at school with what I was learning from church and saying, well, what do you mean she was a virgin? Well, what do you mean he rose from the dead? Well, what do you mean? Well, what do you mean? And the Sunday school superintendent said that my questions were disturbing the other students and asked my mother to please keep me home. So my boyfriend's father was a Baha'i, and he had given me a book on the Baha'i faith, and I loved some of the things that I read about that. So my mother said, well, if they can't answer your questions, then I guess you don't have to go to church or go to Sunday school. And I said, great, I'll become a Baha'i. And she said, no, you won't. And so I had been studying Taoism. I had given this report on Taoism, was fascinated by what I had read in the Tao Te Ching. It is the one spiritual book that I have read the most, and it has informed me throughout my life. And so I said, well, I don't have to go anywhere, nor do I have to announce that I'll be a Taoist. And so I said, I'll be a Taoist. And that began my journey of trans-traditionalism. I didn't know it at the time, but being able to see from several different spiritual paths, principles and concepts that spoke to me, and being able to combine them and align them in a way that informed my view of the world, my understanding of the world, and left me open to more questions and more answers. And so I have continued on that journey, being able to see what was being offered, take something that spoke to me, and keep moving, using it to be who I am.
Can I
wanted to ask,
Dennis, can I just follow up
Go ahead.
with one question? And then at some point, while you were doing your work as in organizational development and cultural competency, which we want to come to, at some point you decided to get ordained in a mainstream church. Why?
Well, because I had great disdain for Christianity. And I thought that churches were some of the unhealthiest organizations I had come across. They were repressive and oppressive. And I thought I could make a difference. but I couldn't get in because I wasn't credentialed and I didn't know church language. So I was being mentored by a man who was minister of a large liberal church. And he said, you know, you ought to go to seminary. I said, well, I was planning on doing something. And he says, but you need to go to a Christian seminary because you feel that you have been rejected by Christianity. You need to understand what it is before you reject it. You need to understand what it's supposed to be. So it was one of the hardest things I did because I'm not a true believer, but I also wanted unimpeachable credentials because of my irreverent self. I wanted to know what the doctrine said. I wanted to know what the Bible said. I just wanted to know so that I could use the language, use the codes, and use what I learned to help people who were in a church environment to make it a better experience for themselves.
This is fascinating because for those listening in that are parents, a lot to be learned there because you had a parent or parents that encouraged you to think for yourself, to not feel forced into anything. And I think that helped whet your appetite for more spirituality. And then you were lucky to have a mentor. That was some great advice, that if you want to change it, you have to be credentialed, you have to get in and follow that. Now, once you did that, once you became an ordained minister, did you function through that particular denomination, or did you go independent? What was your next step?
In order to be ordained, I had to take a church. By that time in my career, I was well established as a consultant. And one of the reasons I'm a consultant is that I don't have the temperament to go to the same place every day with the same people doing the same thing, using the same two skills. And I'm a good manager. I'm not an excellent manager because I get cranky. But they said, if you want to be a minister, you have to take a church. So I took a church as an interim. And so that's where I started. But I left as soon as I could. I left after 2 years and continued in my consulting practice and just made myself available through my contacts to people from other faith traditions. So right from the beginning, I was invited to work, say, at the national offices of different Christian faiths. And then because I am so trans-traditional, other basically liberal, progressive to moderate faith organizations. And I think the reason that people like me and like my message is that I acknowledge who they are. I don't come trying to convert you. I come saying, what are your values? So if these are your values, then let's see if we can align them with your behavior. And so I start with they are, and then I give voice. Oftentimes in Christian churches, people will come to me and say, I didn't know you could say that. I didn't know that people believe that. I'm here because all my family is here and I don't know anything else, but I don't buy all that stuff that they preach from the pulpit. And I said, you don't have to. Being here because your family's here, because this is community, is a good enough reason to stay.
Well, Reverend Nuri-Robins, if I may, in your consulting work, you've had a long and successful career. You consult with a variety of different organizations, not just religious and spiritual ones. When you, in the course of your work, are consulting with, say, a business or a secular nonprofit or whatever, how does your spiritual perspective enter into that work? Because it must be implicit rather than explicit, I'm guessing.
It is. And there was a time when I didn't even realize it. I was teaching cost-benefit analysis. And on break, a couple of the participants cornered me and said, we want to know that spiritual stuff you were talking about. I didn't know what I had said, but apparently the way I present, people kind of get it. The unifying thread for me are values. The religion gives you answers to questions that otherwise there would not be any answers. And they also give you codes for behavior. And we call those values. I believe this, therefore I act this way. So when I work with in a church, when I work with an organization, I said, what's your mission? What are your values? What are your shared values? So if this is what you believe, this is what I'm observing in your work environment here and your work culture, and I see a misalignment. So let's talk about how you can live into your values, or let's talk about the real values that you have. And go ahead, Dennis.
I'm also curious, you have had exposure by choice to many different religious traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, religious, trans-traditional. And each religion has a set usually of spiritual practices,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's prayer or meditation or just going out and doing good deeds and all. What in your own life have you found to be the most effective, most beneficial, most spiritual practices that you've encountered that you may have incorporated into your own life?
Silence. I was introduced to silence, the spirituality of silence with Quakers. I had a girlfriend in high school who would take me to Quaker meetings. And to this day, at least one Sunday a year, and for me, it's usually the first Sunday in the year, I go to a Quaker meeting and sit in silence. I love what happens in the silence. The most profound spiritual experience I had, I went on a 40-day retreat with Jesuits, guided by Jesuits. Mm-hmm. And most of that time was spent in complete silence. Wow. And so I find that is when spirit speaks to me, or that is when I can hear spirit. And when I go to my studio and sit creating and using my hands, and there's nothing else going on, I'm able to do a brain dump and hear what spirit has to say. So it's silence.
Yeah, you remind me of a quote I've come across many times, and it's been attributed to Rumi. It's also been attributed to Father Thomas Keating, and maybe they both said it, but it's that the language of God is silence, and everything else is a bad translation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yes.
So when you, one of the things you have become a recognized expert in is what you call a cultural competency. Mm-hmm. This is a time, and one of the reasons it was important, I thought, to get you on the show, where we're all dealing with issues around diversity, racism, structural issues around race and diversity. Tell us what you mean by cultural competency and why that is so important.
Cultural competence is a point on a continuum that is used to describe behaviors from cultural destruction to cultural proficiency. And so as we move toward cultural competence to cultural proficiency, it's a journey that allows us to approach the world understanding that culture is dominant everywhere we go. You cannot not have culture. And with culture comes biases. And our job is not to not have biases, but to be aware of what they are so that they don't interfere with the relationships that we're trying to build. It goes back to values. So if you have a value for human beings, if you have a value for creating space where humans can come and engage in a productive and effective way, then cultural competence is a way of doing that so that you learn to manage the dynamics of difference. So you learn what it means to really value diversity. And so you begin to look at your practices and your policies so that you can institutionalize the knowledge that you have about cultural differences. So you don't just look at me and see me as one thing, but understand that I am a collection of identities and intersectionalities, and it makes a difference. The difference.
One of the one observation I've heard from a number of the folks we've interviewed, and that is that in church services, in church gatherings, regardless of the religion, there has been a lack of diversity, and I think that they say, you know, the most segregated place you can find is a church on a Sunday, because it's generally one type of person going to one type of church. And I know there are many folks from different religious traditions that are all trying to deal with that and change that. What advice would you give to them?
First, to acknowledge that churches are by definition exclusive. They're designed to attract one kind of person, and to recognize that there's diversity beyond what people look like, beyond their skin color or their apparent race or ethnicity, and that those unseen aspects of diversity are really, really important and shape the culture of the church. And to understand that if what they want is racial or ethnic diversity, that ethnic groups are not monolithic. Every Black person is not exactly the same, does not have the same values, does not want the same kind of worship experience. And so you need to take some time to figure out who you are as an individual, as a church, as a collective, and then go find people who fit that profile.
It's interesting, if I could just follow up, I grew up Catholic, and one of the last times I went to a Catholic church a number of years ago, the priest got in front of the group and he said, I'm going to list 20 things. If you don't believe all 20 of these things, you don't belong here. Mm-hmm. I didn't go along with about 14 out of 20, and that was it. But that was their choice, I guess. And, you know, they got the folks they wanted, but I felt that was very unfortunate that it was done that way.
But at least he was honest about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And most churches will say, oh, everybody come, we welcome everyone. And it's not true.
That's not what they want. Good point.
A lot of our listeners and viewers are refugees from mainstream religions, or they're in the class of people who are being called unaffiliated, or they're part of a non-mainstream organization, whether it's the yoga community or one of the offshoots of Buddhist or Hindu streams that have come to us, or they're eclectic. But a lot of the organizations we all come across, even in the unconventional category, are monolithic in many ways, or lack diversity. And I know many of them want to have more diversity in their ranks, but don't know how to go about it, or what's keeping people of color or people from different neighborhoods or whatever from coming to them. They'd like to have it. What advice would you give?
I would ask first, why? Why do you want it?
Mm-hmm.
And where's the diversity in your life? And what makes you think, if you have no diversity in your life, that you're going to get diversity in this church? Go fix your life. Go diversify your life, and then invite a friend.
Right. And along those lines, I mean, in Christianity, the reality is they talk about diversity and all, but even diversity of thought. But I am the way. This is the way. our purpose is to convert everybody to what we are, make disciples of all nations. It isn't, and it's a great point you made, because I wasn't thinking it that way. But when you said that, hey, yes, everybody come, but they don't really want everybody. They want everybody that's going to filter into them that way. So, I was curious, you mentioned you enjoyed the Quaker meetings because it was about silence. Another reason would be, it seems with what I know of the Quakers, they're more open to a diversity of thought and belief than many other denominations.
Yes, absolutely, they are. And in a Quaker meeting, I'm not sitting there arguing with whoever is speaking, because when they do speak, it's very, very short.
Mm-hmm.
Unitarians are pretty diverse, and their churches are pretty culturally competent, and they are still pretty white. Because part of the church experience is the music, the rhythm, the feel, and people want something that affirms who they are and how they are in the world. And so I was ordained by the Presbyterians, who call themselves God's frozen chosen. And you know, a lot of folks don't want to go to Presbyterian churches because they're boring. And the music is like a mayonnaise sandwich. So, you know, you got to find, if you're going to have your spirit fed, then you want to be fed in a way that is familiar to your spirit. And oftentimes the churches that are ethnically diverse either have this variety show kind of liturgy, that so there's something for everyone to be annoyed by, or it is this gray kind of thing that no one likes, but everybody is proud of the fact that look at all who come.
Kikanza, on your website, there's a page for labeled diversity, equity, inclusion. And one of the bullet points there is to examine bias, privilege, and entitlement. That sounds easy, but I don't think it is. Or it may sound intimidating and maybe easier than people think. What does it entail, and why is it important?
What it entails is taking a look at the lenses that you use to see the world and interpret what you see, to create an environment where people can point out to you that what you're saying or doing is hurtful or harmful to someone else. It is starting with self, looking inward to see, what do I like? What do I not like? What do I know I like and don't like? And how have I been influenced to like or dislike or fear or be drawn to something that is like me or not like me, and how do I express that? I was talking to a prospective client, an attorney, who said to me, well, you know, our offices are on the 54th floor. I said, okay. And we have really nice furniture, you know, it's pretty wealthy downtown law firm. I says, okay. And he says, so it would undermine your credibility if you let people know you hadn't seen anything nice like that. So he looked at me as a Black woman and assumed I was poor and had not been exposed to nice things. So that was bias. He thought he was being kind, and it was bias that was creating a barrier to him seeing who I am or even knowing what kind of questions to ask me. So the work that I do is helping people to unpack stuff like that. These hidden biases, these unintentional biases that keep you from doing what you say you want to do, that keep you from living into the values that you say you believe.
How did you respond to him?
In my head.
You both. Great answer.
I didn't work for them.
You should have invited him for dinner. You get the most elegant dinner parties ever.
Philip, I could follow up
Yeah,
with
go
with a question. I did want to get to your book, Cultural Proficiency and Fish Out of Water. Folks, what should folks expect to get from that book?
There are two of them, Dennis. You just said two titles.
Okay.
Yeah. Fish Out of Water is a book about creating a culture of belonging. So I think many people have had an experience of feeling like a fish out of water. I don't belong here, and I'm not exactly sure why they welcomed me in, but you know, like, I don't get it. So what we do is help people to figure out organizational codes. So if I want to belong, how do I figure out how to belong? I'm mentoring someone who just doesn't fit. Let me tell them how to figure out let me help them let me tell them what to do so that they can fit within this organization. I'm a manager, and I really do want to welcome a diverse clients, diverse colleagues and staff. What do I do to make sure that this environment is going to be safe and welcoming and supportive of a variety of folks who come to work here? So that's what it does.
Now, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Your work is, for the most part, with organizations. And we talked about how you bring your own spiritual values and orientation into that work, whether it's explicit or not. The advice you give around issues like diversity and inclusion, such as what we just said, examine bias, privilege, and entitlement. Others on you talk about microaggressions and various other things. Many of our listeners do not run organizations and are maybe not even involved in organizations. How are these considerations around issues like inclusivity and adapting to a diverse culture, how does that serve us as individuals in our own spiritual journey?
It invites us to get to know ourselves better. It invites us to ask questions that might make us uncomfortable, and it invites us to grow. I was at a very large church in San Francisco that has a huge ministry to the poor and homeless and marginal, and it has great music. And so I went driving my Audi, of which I am probably too proud, and I parked, and it was stacked parking, and I said, okay. And they asked for my keys, and I said, okay. And I asked for a ticket, and they said, well, we don't give tickets. Well, how do I know that it's faith, it's trust? And I said, okay. And I walk across the street, and there's a line around the block, people standing in line to get a bag of groceries. And I thought, how wonderful. I'm so proud to be here. I went in the back way, went in through the basement and up the stairs, and there was an AIDS ministry and a domestic violence ministry and a food hunger ministry. And I am so proud to be here, and I'm even going to write another check to give to them. And I sat down on the church pew in my church lady's clothes, smelled something funny. What is that? And I turned and looked, and one of those people, you know, that was standing outside in line to get services was sitting next to me, unwashed, definitely not dressed for church. And I was like, damn, Queen of Diversity has been invited to her growing edge. I want to help those people, but I don't want to go to church with those people.
Or sit next to them.
Definitely not sitting next to them. To my credit, I didn't move. I didn't speak to them, but I didn't move. But see, it's recognizing those things within yourself and then being able to do better next time. Just one conversation at a time, one experience at a time.
Right. I'm curious, do you consider yourself Christian? And if you do consider yourself Christian, is that limiting in terms of inclusiveness and in regard to faith?
No, I don't consider myself Christian.
And if you're giving a guest sermon at a Presbyterian church of a Sunday, as I
Yes.
know you have,
And we'll do next Sunday. Yep.
will you, and would
They don't
you,
ask you.
would you answer the question the same way?
Nope.
What would you say?
I would say I have been ordained by the Presbyterian Church. I have studied the Bible in 3 dead languages, and I know the Christian doctrine. My job here is not to share my faith. My job is to help you connect with and align your behaviors with your faith.
Great answer. And I think one of the great problems in religion and what's led to a lot of conflict is you either have to be on team A or team B. I'm a Christian. I'm a Hindu. Why is that necessary? Why does one have to self-identify like that? And I think that question is not asked enough or dealt with enough by religions.
Yeah, well, most religions have this chosen people concept.
Right.
And we are the chosen ones. We have the word, we have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Come, let us feed
Right.
it to you.
Well, we know who the real chosen people are. Here's
Those from Brooklyn.
Yes, we do.
when you already answered the question I was about to ask you, which is, what about your own unconscious biases and so forth, and you brought that up on your own. We don't have much time left, but one question that comes to mind is, what is the most common, in your experience with well-meaning people, especially in spiritual communities, what is the revelation that is most surprising to people when they examine themselves and look at their own sense of privilege and
Good question.
That privilege has nothing to do with money. That privilege has to do with power and access.
that's important,
Yeah.
because it's very easy to say, well, I don't feel privileged, you're privileged, you have more money than I do, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So what does it have to do with?
In power and access.
Mm.
And it's also important that even those people who are in dispossessed groups, are in historically marginalized, exploited, excluded groups, there is some privilege there. I have the privilege of whining because I'm a Black woman and you have to listen to me because you're so privileged.
I have one final
You can't
question.
silence me.
Yeah, I have one final
Well,
question.
I can. I have control of the recording button.
You do? One final question, and that is from me. People listening in, watching now also, maybe they feel they would like to participate in some religious ceremonies, services, hear a talk, but they don't want to join a group. They don't want to be, What would you recommend to them? Where can they go where they'll be welcome, but they don't have to self-identify? They don't have to, go through some ceremony to become part of that group?
Go visit. Go someplace and visit and just say, I'm just visiting, or say, I'm shopping around. Say, I'm just getting comfortable with the neighborhood, looking to see what's available. So don't identify yourself as a seeker. I'm a visitor. So I've been going to this church that's 8 miles from my house for 15 years. And I always identify as a visitor. No, I'm not seeking membership. No, I'm just dropping in.
A lot of those places, if you're a first-time visitor, they give you a gift basket. So it's a very...
I haven't been to any of those places. They usually put out a basket and want you to put money in it.
They give you a red mug so everybody knows you're a visitor and they won't speak.
We only have a minute or so. Do you have any final messages for our eclectic audience that is eager to hear, your final wise words?
Thank you so much for having me. And I would say that it's important not to become self-satisfied. And it's important to remember that we are only as good as we are, one conversation at a time. You're only as good as your last encounter with someone who's like you or not like you. So be curious and be humble.
Great
Sounds
advice.
good,
Thank you very
Kikanza.
much.
Thanks, Kikanza. Thanks for being with us. And everybody, you can learn more about Kikanza and her work at Kikanza Nuri-Robins, one word, kikanzanuri-robins.com.
We'll have all that posted up.
Posted. Thanks for joining us. Take care, and I'll see you soon. And I hope our
I
listeners
look forward to meeting you.
too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was Kikanza Nuri-Robins, author, speaker, consultant. And I have to say, Phil, when you told me that she was a consultant, I thought, how does this fit in the area of contemporary spirituality? And it sure did. She was, you knew more about her, of course, than I did. But, her very honest and direct dealings with issues, and being very Christian-like, but not necessarily identifying herself as a Christian. She was really trans-religious, transcultural. That whereas because often it's I'm a Christian and let's see how I fit in with you guys. Whereas if you don't take that identity, and some people feel very important that they do, but for those that don't, I think they can still gain a lot from a lot of different traditions.
Yes, and I think that's happening more and more. Certainly, each generation, according to surveys, is more and more open to input from other traditions and less likely to identify exclusively with one, and much less likely to hold their own tradition as superior.
Yeah, let me just mention again that experience I had, and this doesn't go for all Catholics, and we had Father Thomas James Martin on. He's not like that. Thomas Keating was not like that. But I went to the, I don't know, Catholic, and after a number of years, I'll try a Catholic church again. I went in, it was a nice ceremony and all, and then the priest started lecturing, and it's not a typical lecture, but or sermon. And at one point he said, all right, he listed 20 things you needed to believe to really consider yourself a Catholic. And I'm telling you, there were 14 I was not on board with, maybe 6 or 7 I was. So that was it. I thought I better not come in here anymore. So I think a lot of groups like that. I thought she was incredibly honest when she said, that when churches say, "Hey, come on in, we want everybody." Not really.
No, they don't.
We want everybody that thinks and acts and whatever like that, and that's okay.
Well,
That's okay. But don't say then that you're totally open.
Well, but some are, at least to visitors, and they're. I've been a visitor to many.
Well, so come in and listen, so you can become one of us.
And we welcome you, and you're a fellow human being.
Now, I have a question for you, Phil, and then I won't talk so much. And that is that okay? I know you grew up. Your family was not religious, but Judaism, unlike Christianity, is not. They're not proselytizing. Maybe the religious are proselytizing to the non-religious, but they're not trying to get everyone else to become members that aren't members. And so do you think if somebody visits a synagogue, they're going to maybe perhaps feel more comfortable because the people running that synagogue are not going to say, hey, come become one of us?
That's possible, but I've been a visitor at churches, especially, Christmas time and all that. And no one tries to convert me. I mean, because I choose the proper place. I'm not going to go to a place that's going to be heavy-handed with me. The interesting thing about, and I've been to, I know most synagogues would love, especially on holiday, where they like to share the history and of the tradition and all that. They love it when non-Jews come.
Well, the one last thing, and that is that there are those Christians that would say, and they're being honest, that the message of Christianity is, make apostles of all nations, convert everyone. That is the message. That's what they're supposed to do. So when a Catholic or any Christian says, if they're a minister of that faith, says, well, it's not important to us whether you become one of us or not. That's really not what they're taught. That's really not their mission. Their mission is to get everybody on board with them.
Yeah,
I obviously have a problem with that,
Yeah.
but that if a priest or a minister said that, they're being honest, because that seems to be their mission.
But some are, they don't feel that that's
They're
an
reformed.
important part of their mission. Or, and I've encountered this, they feel it's inevitable that especially Jews will come around and recognize who the true Messiah was, and that they recognize that being heavy-handed is counterproductive. So they're being as nice as they can be, and they expect subtly that you'll come around and say, "Oh."
But that being said, it is interesting too that I have some friends, close friends, that are very observant. They're Jewish. They're very Orthodox, and some of my Jewish friends who are not are nervous being around them because they feel that they're going to proselytize them to make me more religious. Whereas with me, I'm not going to have any pressure.
You're definitely right. You would be far more comfortable with, orthodoxy or certain kind of rabbis, because they're not going to try to convert you. But me, because of my last name, and I come from, my heritage is Jewish, they'll be all over me to be more observant and to accept my Jewishness, and what am I doing with all this Hindu Buddhist stuff, and so I've encountered that. That's where it gets obnoxious, when you're a member of the tribe, but you're not on the program. So I've encountered that in my life, and I avoid it. I avoid situations like that. I learned that when I was young. Just don't go there.
How did you meet, by the way, how did you meet Kikanza? And I thought she was wonderful. I mean, she was very insightful and does great work, and very interesting, very unique. I've never encountered anyone with her perspective. How did you first encounter her?
I was part of an organization called the Forge Institute, who had a program called the Forge Guild of Spiritual Leaders and Teachers. And it was intentionally trans-traditional. The whole idea was to bring people who are on different paths, following different traditions or no traditions, to learn from each other and grow spiritually with each other. And so we had a local group in LA, and somebody recommended Kikanza, and she became part of it, and that's how I met her. And that group, in one iteration or another, has stayed intact. We still meet monthly, even now, during COVID on Zoom. So it became an important part of both of our lives, and she became a good friend. So, but that's how it started. So it was an intentional trans-traditional grouping, which I found, I think was a living example of how much we can gain by reaching beyond the borders of our own spirituality, which I think many, many people have discovered on their own. And we're very lucky because we live in a time when it's easy to do that, especially if you live in a big city, like if you want to explore, and you can explore online and all that. And I think that kind of exploration is breaking down a lot of the barriers that cause so much trouble in the world, when people think they have all the answers, and they think in terms of being members of a tribe. Kikanza transcends tribes.
Right.
That's
her perspective was new to me, and I thought it was wonderful. I mean, like she's an ordained Presbyterian minister, but does not consider herself Christian. If they ask you, they're not going to ask me if I'm Christian. I'll just say I'm an ordained minister. I've studied the scriptures, and I love the 3 dead languages, she said, which was very well put. And then who's going to question that? But I think it's, why not enjoy the teachings without having to say I'm a member of the club?
No, I have to tell you, I knew her when she got ordained, and I remember thinking, is really courageous and took a lot of discipline to go through seminary and the process of ordination and being true to yourself and getting ordained, even though you didn't buy into everything. And to the credit of the Presbyterian people who ordained her, they didn't make her being a bit of an apostate, an impediment. I mean, mutual friend, one of our mutual friends is very much more Christian and much more traditional in his Christian pastor identity. And he's always going to Kikanza, how did they ordain you? It's like, and I admire that. I thought it was, she had a purpose in doing it.
Great guest, another great guest. And for those listening or even watching us now, keep us on the air. Thank you to those that have contributed. And if you can, please do so. If you can't, keep watching. Dive into our archives, enjoy them. You'll bathe in spirituality. And if you do want to contribute, go to spiritmatterstalk.com, and it's very clearly explained there how to do it, and it's very easy to do. So thank you for your support, and thank you for listening and watching, and we'll keep coming at you.
If you prefer the videos, then please do subscribe on our YouTube channel.
Yes, please.
And you'll be notified each time we post something new. Okay.
And thank you. Wait, one more last thing. Thank you, if he's listening, to Jack Griesaber, who has joined us on the technical end of things. So anything that we've advanced in that area, we can attribute to Jack. So thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
There you go.
Bye.
All right, till next time.